Where Loyalties Lie. Honor Guard. Chapter 10. Chaos by Loyalliar. Kilimanjaro's summit rose as three sharp peaks, not altogether as far away as Rainbow had expected. In the distance, they seemed refined and polished and reminiscent of the spires of Celestia's tiara. Closer inspection gave them rough edges and the sheer steepness of jagged teeth, like one might find within the mouth of a foul predator. 2 miles below, Rainbow Dash rose from the brief rest at the broken doorway of the ancient stone structure. Her zebra escort glanced over as she rose and nodded slowly. His hoof casually pressed through a rough canvas bag of fruit in her direction. With a smile and nod, she pulled out a particularly large green banana.
Are you sure this is wise? Of those who enter, every pony dies. If you wish to endanger yourself, it is your right. But Shannon will be eye of white.
Rainbow cocked her head. What, 'cause of the monster?
Your foe is a true danger, yes,
But if you're going to just speaking of rhymes to be polite, you don't have to. Rainbow smiled as disarmedly as he could manage. You aren't hurting my feelings. He stopped and looked away pensively. After a moment, the zebra frowned.
there are traps, I understand. My ancestors believed that the spirit of the temple needed to be protected from outsiders in order to earn its blessings.
Was that so hard?
The challenge isn't why I was wary. The poetry is.
He stopped just as the final word was about to leave his tongue.
It is proper.
Whatever. You said there were traps. Are we talking like trap doors or spikes out of the floor or what?
I do not know. The temple is ancient.
When Dash turned toward the door, he added a rather hasty further warning.
You should not go.
Oh, you were doing so well. Rainbow shook her head. Anyway, I think I can take care of this. Even if I can't fly yet, I'm still really fast, and I do know a few tricks. She neglected to mention they came from a Foles book series. Passing my hat, and I'll get this filly out. What's her name again?
Mizungu.
Mazungu. Got it. Well, anyway, wish me luck.
I shall return to the village at nightfall if you do not return. I hope you will survive long enough to learn.
Rainbow shook her head and responded sarcastically. Thanks for believing me. See you in a few. She then pulled down her pith helmet on her head and strode into the ruins of the temple. Her first steps were defined by the light leaking in from the shattered stones of the entrance. It carried her a dozen feet into the structure, where a pair of similar circular stone doors barred the way further. They bore the marks of some sort of decoration, but the ravages of the ages had stolen away all definition, leaving only a bruised and uneven surface that seemed, at most accurate, to have been some poorly made mockery of the equine form. The doors opened after no small effort on Rainbow's part, ancient hinges finally given in to raw knee grease and athletic talent. Dust settled in from their sudden motion, leaving behind a passageway into the structure. To Rainbow's surprise, the obvious hallway leading deep into the side of the mountain was lit by tiny magic lights, casting the hallway a faint, depressing blue. The mayor took a spare moment to analyze the walls and floor, but he saw no obvious arrow holes, nor hinges where a trapdoor might lead to a short fall and an untimely demise. No, the fire was likely to burst out of any secret chambers, nor snakes descend from darker corners. With a tentative step, she placed one hoof inside the structure. Nothing happened. She took another, then another. As soon as she released the doors, they swung shut behind her. A moment of panic it was alleviated when a gentle test of her hoof confirmed they could still be opened from within. Swinging doors seemed unusual for an ancient zebra temple, but they weren't trying to kill her, and as such, she was prepared to leave them be. Each step carried it with a rough flagstone, covered in moisture and the occasional stain of mold. The air was musty and thick and hot above all else, drawing sweat from Rainbow's skin and a sagging pace from her hooves. The hallway progressed into the shadows as far as Rainbow could see, and farther still. A steady pace carried her forward, interrupted only when she passed the first of the magical lights. The little ball of ethereal glow, devoid of any flame or electricity for a source, shifted in tone from a deep blue to a Tartarian red that only served to darken the surrounding statues. The Pegasus turned, spread her wings, and waited. Somewhere nearby, water dripped. All other noise the echoing shadow could bear was the sound of the mare's own breathing, slow and steady. She forced herself to focus. It was just a light. Nothing had gone wrong. No reason to start talking to herself or freaking out. It wasn't even a trap, just some strange magic. She closed her eyes for a moment in thought, then pulled off her pit helmet and tossed it down the hall. Sure enough, whenever it passed the light's color changed. 40 feet of hallway were coated in red of a fire too dark to truly burn, but too pale and lifeless to resemble blood. When nothing further had happened, she proceeded forward to grab her hat. She stopped to a sort of clicking that issued from further down the path. It was organic, clearly, reminding her of an insect with far too many legs. She watched the darkness for some few moments, and for her trouble, earned not a single sight of motion or life. Relaxing, she watched forward a dozen more steps, and reached down to claim her hat. Before her eyes, the moss and mortar that held the heavy stone bricks of the floor together cracked. She lunged back and flared her wings. Had they borne her flight, her reflexes might have been fast enough, but instead, the lights all went out as one, and she felt herself fall into the pit of pure darkness. Wind rushed past her, accompanied by the crashing and crunching of the stone rubble. Then it hit her, with a heavy stone pressing in the center of her spine and pounding out of her a single sharp and piercing gasp of pain. She lay there, unable to move for the pain, for some time. How long, she did not know. Darkness surrounded her in all directions, accompanied by the less faint dripping of water and the occasional sound of some vermin or creature skittering. That and the breathing, ever present, echoing from somewhere further within. She thought it was her own, echoing back, until she held in a breath and heard it as it echoed without a prompt. Something else was in the shadows with her. Its breath was deep. Its lungs were large. As the throbbing of her wings and back subsided, she began to feel the rest of her surroundings. The pile of rubble beneath her was dry and dusty, but the stones that had retained their flat, smooth surface were moist and slick, and most notably cold. Not unlike the sensation of placing one's head against a sheet of metal, the frigid wetness drained away the heat of her body, leaving her feathers twitching and shivering as they struggled to preserve her. She rose slowly, regretting every motion. She could still walk, and her wings still worked. Were it not for reckoning seeds, they still would have flown. She only suffered the regret of the pain that seared through her legs with each and every subtle shift. A slow tickling sensation slid against her right hind hoof. Startled, the leg shifted, producing a sickening crunch, and splattering some foul-smelling liquid onto her hoof. She pulled her hoof away from whatever it was and jumped away, landing some unknown distance into the darkness. She couldn't even see the nose on her face, until all at once, the tiniest changes rewrote her entire world. A single torch ignited above her, revealing her surroundings, as if prompted by her unspoken desires. Her pile of broken stones and rubble came to rest in the center of an intersection. 2 hallways stretched out in 4 directions, each one spreading into darkness. She turned to each, but found not a single distinguishing feature. All were cold stone blocks, bearing little bits of moss and roots peeking through the subterranean walls. All the tiny noises had stopped, giving deference to the inexplicable island of light. Rainbow looked back at her rubble again and saw what remained of a centipede, at least 2 feet long, crushed into the rocks. Its sewage-green blood had stained her rear roof. Rainbow looked up finally. There was the hole, 80 feet overhead. If she waited, and nothing went wrong, she could still fly out. Waiting, however, was no more an option in that moment than it had been in the Marzipan village. If anything, her urgency was only compelled further by the quiet but constant sounds of life that were slowly returning in the aftermath of her fall. Her mind asked what daring do would do, but the answer wasn't very promising. 10 years of hard-earned education in archaeology separated the fictional pony from her real counterpart, and without such an education, it would be hard to know if the zebras gave special recognition to a particular cardinal direction. Instead, Rainbow looked over her choices again, and was surprised by a single change. Another torch had ignited, 100 feet down the length of another of the nearly featureless stone shafts. She eyed it cautiously, but it made no change. It burned as though it had always ignited, though Rainbow knew the idea was ridiculous. Torches burnt out. It only took, what, an hour or so? Rainbow glanced over her options once more, and then set her gaze again on the path set aside by its light. If nothing else, she could at least see an ambush coming in the light. The mare then remained still, only long enough to retrieve her pith helmet, before moving on to the shadowy passages of the temple. With each step, Rainbow's trepidation grew. Lights appeared again and again, guiding her path, although they were hardly necessary when she found her way devoid of forks or crossroads or any choices at all. Instead, the path listed aimlessly back and forth, at times coiling on itself or twisting in ways that seemed to make no sense at all. Its only reliable constant was the slow but steadily growing upward slope that had accompanied each further step. Something was clearly wrong, yet the mare could imagine no better plan than to continue forward. Behind her, the path had faded again to the darkness as the torches went out. Her steps finally came to rest at a pair of gem-encrusted doors, not unlike those that had first blocked her passage to the entrance of the structure. Their pattern was a swirly figure, looking for all the world like a snake painted in the shape of a zebra. It was long and slender. Its one solid gold eye, marked with a ruby for an iris, stared menacingly back at Rainbow. So, this is the worm monster? Kind of weird looking. Her eyes listed lazily up to his face, and the terrible horn and fangs that decorated his brow and mouth. Yeah, you heard me. You weird looking. She then raised her hooves as if to strike the stone. You got something to say about it? Because after the dash is done with you, you're going to think twice about full-napping zebras. She then threw a quick flurry of punches, and one particular vigorously thrust that ended with her hoof loudly typing the door. Always ready for violence. The voice had been masculine, deep and smooth, with a quality of mystery. Rainbow dropped to all four hooves and lowered herself. Wings flared. Who's there? She hoped her voice would come out brave and intimidating, but her first syllables were instead punctuated with what might have been called a squeak. Who said that? Instead of a verbal answer, she found a response in the slow but steady shift of the doors as they swung open of their own accord. She backed away, only to have the last light of the hallway behind her suddenly fall into darkness. All the light she could claim to know was leaking between the crack in the doors. The glow was strong enough to force Rainbow to squint. Warm air rushed over her, tickling her wings and softening the ache in her spine. When the assault on her eyes finally abated, her vision was filled with an enormous, well-finished squared room. Zebra spears and shields decorated the walls, along with colorful banners of smooth canvas that seemed too bright and too clean to match the age of the structure. Beneath the banners and weapons, every surface of the walls and ceiling were carved, with intricate details too fine to be made out at Rainbow's distance. A smooth floor of wide, white stone tiles framed the room's only central structure. The Pegasus was inclined to call it an altar. A single stone mass composed of a dozen different textures and materials had been somehow put together, creating a basin at the feet of the statue, some 7 feet tall. Like the doors to the chamber, the statue was encrusted in 1,000 jewels. They seemed tacked on at random, creating what ultimately resembled more of a disco ball than a valuable and ancient idol. Rainbow removed her makeshift hat and rolled it across the floor. It failed spectacularly to be impaled on foot-long steel spikes, or engulfed in a torrent of flames, or pierced by a hail of arrows, or fall into a pit of angry piranhas or crocodiles. Instead, it spun like a dropped bit before finally coming to rest at the foot of the altar. The mare put a gentle hoof down and on the first step into the room. Nothing happened. Her step was followed by one, and then another, and then a third, until finally her pacing carried her to the side of the towering statue. Oh, for goodness sake, I thought it would take you all day to walk over here. Rainbow quite literally jumped at the voice, landing at the side of the misshapen idol. Who said that? Who's there? Oh, you've forgotten me already. A quiet accompanied a swirl of fog as the transparent effigy of a brown-furred serpentine body came into being. It's only been, what, 4 years? Forgive me, but time is so hard to keep track of when you're stuck playing a lawn ornament. Discord! Rainbow pulled her hose up. How did you break free? No. That's the thing. I'm actually sitting in Canterlot right now. He pulled back his enlightening paw and then brought it around Rainbow's face. The unexpected slap passed right through her without any contact. See? Just a figment of your imagination. He then let out a twisted chuckle, causing Rainbow's stomach to turn. Then his yellow eyes glanced around the room. Where is this, anyway? Zabraika. Discord's left eyebrow rose, stopping its motion only when it transferred not only his brow, but the goat horn atop it. Then his elongated face broke into another smile. Folks, I just want to let you know, the moment he started popping up, Discord's image song started playing in my head, and it hasn't stopped for the past few minutes now. God, I love that song. Right, this place. Can't say I'm a fan of art, but what can you do? A bunch of terrified creatures were pursuing an all-powerful spirit, and their art makes me look like a fool's imaginary friend. He idly snapped his fingers. To Rainbow's relief, nothing happened, save the strange collection of noises that issued from his digits. Thanks again, by the way. Rainbow struck out his tongue at him. That's what you get for messing with us, Discord! Ever the cunning linguist I see. Discord shook his head. You know, as much joy as it gives me to see you here, I didn't show up just to trade insults. Well, how are you here at all? Rainbow asked. I'm anywhere you see my face, Rainbow Dash. The Statue Gardens, the Forgotten Zebra Temple. He reclined in midair, unfolding his mismatched hands behind his head. Even the stained glass windows in dear Celestia's palace. The sarcasm in his voice was punctuated by the echoing of the room. Not that I could do much, other than talk at the moment. The thumb of his talon gestured toward the statue on the altar. First thing I do was turn that into a chocolate mousse, or maybe bring it to life. You know, some opera would do wonders for the ambience around here. Rainbow's patience had run out. What do you want, Discord? Fine. No small talk. It's not like I came 4,000 miles to say hello. Anyway, you're down here to save Luna, right? How do you know that? Oh, Rainbow, don't you get it? I'm Discord. You know, chaos, disharmony, strife. He gestured idly with his hands at each word. I know that whenever some really juicy chaos happens, and my word, that whole fiasco with Luna, well, it was the juiciest. His fingers snapped, accompanied by the audible quackening of a duck, but nothing else changed. Darn it, that would have been some excellent opportunity for some lemon juice. In any case, are you down here in the jungle because you want to save Luna, right? Yeah, so what? You going to try to kill me or something? Discord shook his head. Killing ponies isn't really my thing, Rainbow. Life has so much more chaos in it than death. His grin grew frighteningly wide, showing off all his teeth. After all, I could have just plucked your head off the last time we met if I wanted to. But I don't. And I especially don't want Luna to die. She's still my favorite of the six to play with, and I hate to have her running off so soon, so I'm going to give you some advice. Why should I listen to you? Well, frankly, Rainbow, you don't have much of a choice. Even the little power I have through this stone was enough to get you down here, and now I know the only ways out. He snapped his fingers again, and this time they were accompanied by the sound of stone grinding slowly against stone. Rainbow's attention was drawn to the far side of the room, where a pair of carved stone panels were sliding away to reveal passages further into the temple structure. I might have lied when I said I couldn't do anything, but what's a little white lie between friends? You're not my friend, Discord. And here, I was hoping you could find it in your heart to forgive me. He shook his head and returned to his usual carefree mocking grin. The left passageway leads to to smog. She repeated the word exactly as he said it. Smog? It was Rainbow's turn to raise a brow in confusion. Is that the name of the monster? Discord merely nodded, before continuing his explanation. The other path leads out of the mountain, to the south. If you take it, you'll be no more than 2 hours' flight from the elk and Luna's cure. So he really does have the cure? Discord laughed aloud and shook his head. That would be cheating, Rainbow. I have no idea. There's no good chaos looking at the future coming up with plans. He took a moment to stick a long avian talon down his throat, gagging. Ah, those are your options. Rainbow looked between the two passages. I told the zebras I would rescue Mzungu. You are going to get yourself killed if you go that way. And maybe you don't believe me, but I'd much rather have you around long enough to see you betray your friends. He pressed the tips of his fingers together, creating a steeple point in front of his face. So really, go save her. Path's right there. Dash took a single step toward the path he offered, before stopping again. What about reckoning? What about him? Even if you weren't already out here alone, you'd be better off without him. Discord pulled, seemingly from thin air, a green army helmet and a smoking cigar, of which he quickly put to use. His voice took on a gruff, war-weary tone.
You see a lot of things in the field, kid. They're not all pretty. Sometimes you make you seem go pretty crazy. Best thing for some pony like that is just to take the hit to the head and enjoy a long dirt nap.
Can't you ever give a straight answer? No. Discord shook his head, as if correcting a child on a minor mistake. It is me, after all. Worst case scenario, he gets killed. But if you go down that other passage, you're going to be the one that ends up underground. Now, I'd love to stay in chat, but I've got a caller on the other line, and I think I should really take it. Good luck. With a snap of his fingers, the Draconquist was gone. Oh, you would love to believe that, wouldn't you, Mr. Reader? Why am I not pleased by that answer? Right. Rainbow closed her eyes and shook her head, turned toward the left path. My Discord would actually want me to be safe. She stopped only once on her path to grab a shield from the wall. To her surprise, it was actually a single piece, crafted out of the same wood as the spear behind it. Shrugging, she lifted over her right foreleg and continued on into the mountain. Shining armor and glowing solos strode side by side into a towering cloud hangar adorned with radiant blue feathers. Pan Equestria Shipping Services. The serif adorned front left a bit to be desired in terms of interest. But such advertising probably didn't matter for what essentially existed as a glorified middle mare's storage facility. 15 years ago, this was the Wonderpulse's winter training facility. Going Solo gestured toward the roof at 100 feet ahead. I guess they didn't like the noise from all the other weather factory machines, though.
Explains the size.
Shining Armor was barely interested in her tourist facts anymore. However, it was time for business.
Are you armed?
Solo shook her head. All I had was a bladed shoe, and I had to drop it when you gave us the guard's pony armor. I know they're probably a little big, but could you let me borrow one of yours? Steiny shook his head sternly. Guards pony horseshoes don't come with blades. Just a steel lining to protect the hooves from broken glass and debris. I didn't mean for you to fight. I was just checking. Just keep your eyes open, and if something happens, stay back. Hey, I'm a lover, not a fire. Sarcasm pervaded the endearing look she had offered the stallion. They walked forward into the warehouse, where aisles of crates were stacked on strangely solid platforms of smooth cloud. A few pegasi flitted overhead, but on the ground, Shining and Solo found themselves effectively ignored. Still, each time the other ponies came into view, the Pegasus mare found herself watching them closely, expecting some sort of dirty trick. Do you think something's actually going to go wrong? Shining Armor answered with a non-committal grunt.
If this go-between is actually the contact for Masquerade, he'll know that he's just as guilty as she is. I'll offer him a lot of leniency if he talks, but he might jump to conclusions.
And all these other ponies? Shining actually let out a little chuckle at concern. I'd be willing to bet no more than 2 of them are even on it. More likely he's working alone. There is a reason we call that sort of thing a conspiracy theory. Sorry I asked. Solo continued following only for a few moments before gesturing ahead with a hoof. That looks like him, if Grizzly's description was right. The stallion in question was a Pegasus of at least Shining Armor's height, with a lean frame that seemed mismatched with his golden musculature. A lazy trimmed goatee dominated his square jaw. His eyes, seemingly almost pure onyx, were obscured beneath a massive brow. He gave a long glance at the other ponies behind him, but his concentration remained on the clipboard he held behind his hoofs.
Fancy outfit, buddy. What are you doing in my warehouse?
Your warehouse. So you're go-between then. Shining's question was met with an exasperated groan as the Pegasus put down his clipboard.
Yeah, that's my name. Now, who are you?
Captain Shining Armor of the Royal Guard. I have some questions for you. Though it was subtle and well hidden in the shadows beneath the stallion's brutish brow, Shining's guard's pony instinct could not have missed a quick, instinctual glance toward the warehouse's near side. The mostly confirmed his suspicion of a second exit. The Pegasus spoke up.
Yeah, what do you want? I'm kind of busy here. Can we meet up later if...
I don't think that will be necessary, Shining interrupted. I don't have many questions, but I do need them answered as quickly as possible. The unicorn gave a subtle nod to going solo, as close as he come to a warning about what he was going to do. Now, I just want to say I'm not trying to accuse you of anything right now. I need answers.
Right.
Shining watched as go-between's wings began to beat more rapidly. I was told you were the pony to talk to if I wanted to meet some pony named Masquerade. He didn't say anything to respond. Instead, the pony turned and fled, pumping his wings as fast as he would carry him. Shining's horns gathered mana, but it only took a few seconds to collect enough for his magic to reach out and grab the other stallion. Then came the pain. It might have been indescribable, had he not faced exactly the same magic for Cloudy Mirror. His attention turned to ending the spell, even as his face contorted in agony as he collapsed to his knees. Are you okay? Scully Soul rose to his side, wrapping a wing around him and trying to help him up.
Fine.
Shining answered through gritted teeth.
We're right on track.
What happened? Masquerade put a spell on him, so if some pony tried to hurt him with magic. He shook his head, grateful for a lesson he had learned not a full 3 days earlier. It's a delusion, a nightmare, pain, all over, but it isn't real. She can't actually hurt me. He focused, turning his magic inward, and the pain was relieved. He spared himself 2 panting breaths and stood up again. Solo, stay close. What are you talking about? He just got away! If he just flew off, every pony in the city will have seen him. Just because he has wings doesn't mean he can outrun every pony. Shining took a tentative step towards the structure's rear wall. When his leg failed to give out beneath him, he broke immediately into a brisk jaw. He's still here. Shining's horn began to gather mana as it ran. He stopped only when one of his legs shot out straight through the floor. Whoa! What was that? Used too much magic, the unicorn answered. The spell letting me walk on clouds uses up a lot of my focus. Then let's get help. You don't need to take him on your own. If we leave now, he'll get away. Shining reclassed the cloud walking enchantment on his hoof, then broke into a full gallop. We have to do this now! We don't even know where he went! Rather than finding a door, Shining Armor simply barreled through the wall of the structure, horn first. Given that it was only his hooves which offered resistance to the clouds, he left only a few holes to mark his passing. Only a moment later did he realize that the same path was not so easily open to going solo. Construction-grade clouds weren't the sort of thing you just flew into, as he explained. He momentarily considered waiting, but he didn't have time to lose. Outside, the sun was blindingly bright, and the only safety that spared Shining's eyes from the glare was the shadow of the towering series of buildings next door. Trained eyes, known as a disgruntled security pony, brushing himself off from the cloud he had been thrown against. Seeing his trail, the guard's pony took a moment to spare to gather the mana for a teleportation, followed by a swift prayer that he wouldn't fall through the clouds when he arrived. He blades back into being on large sprays of clouds, flanked on both sides by white pillars. Ahead, a blue and white structure was surrounded by black storm clouds, with strewn lightning at random every few moments. Ahead, the guarded door was decorated with bolts of lightning, though the sign overhead simply read, "Caution." The weather factory's door guard, on seeing another stallion approaching at a run, spoke up forcefully.
Who the hey?
"Shining armor! Royal Guard!" The older pony started getting out of the way far too slowly, and found himself again face down on the cloudy streets of Cloudsdale. "Sorry!" The cloud door failed to open for the unicorn. Instead, he again gained entrance, horn first, feeling no more than a wave of moisture as his armored forge stepped through the barrier. Inside, the structure was a massive storm, quite literally. 1,000 yards of floor space were covered with purple machines which spewed the rough black clouds into a single enormous mass against the ceiling of the room. Its shape reminding Shining of a "Do Not Disturb" sign one might find at a motel, complete with a hole for the handle. At the far end of the space, a huge hole in the floor opened into a field of free-floating storm clouds that hung in open space over the mile of clear air that separated Cloudsdale from the surface. Every few seconds, the edges of the hole glowed with lightning. Shining didn't even have much time to make it into the room. A bolt of lightning struck the ground only a few mere inches from his muzzle. He felt the fur of his coat stand on end. His head shot in the direction of the attack, and saw Go-Between struggling with a Pegasus in a white lab coat over a small puff of cumulonimbus.
"Everybody out! Now!"
Shining bellowed. Before waiting to see if his words had any effect, he let fly a quick blast of his own magic. It was simple enough, and light enough on mana that he didn't have to worry about his hoofs. Unfortunately, it was slow enough to be easily avoided. Go-Between ducked between the towers of thunderclouds, in the opposite direction of the fleeing workers. Shining ran after him, only to be stopped short when the Pegasus bucked a pillar of rising cloud stuff. 3 bolts of raw lightning flew free, striking all around Shining at random. The suspect drove for a hole in the floor. It was only 100 feet away, at most. Shining had one shot. Without hesitation, he threw the simplest and most basic of the guard's pony hexes. He felt his hooves sink into the clouds, but his magic did not give way. The bolt of rose lightning struck Go-Between in the left leg, freezing the limb and leaving the Pegasus spinning onto the stomp on the ground. Shining's mind was again racked with the pain of Masquerade's illusion. He was ready, and a quick burst of magic was all it took to shake off the obvious falsehood that racked his nerves. Feeling the softness of the clouds beneath his feet, he knew he couldn't avoid any magic. With no other option, he galloped forward, ready to bring his hooves to bear on the stung Pegasus. Go-Between rose shakily to his feet, just in time to take a hard right to the hook in the jaw.
"Go-Between!
You are hereby placed under arrest and charged with treason and conspiracy to commit murder. Surrender, and this will be easy." Shining's warning fell on deaf ears, as the surprisingly powerful hoofs slammed against his knee, stealing his footing. He leaned against his side when another blow was aimed for his neck, and instead felt a deadly horseshoe strike the armor on his shoulders. More than one experience had taught him what a blade felt like pressed against the armor. Before it could be brought to bear on his neck, the unicorn leapt backward.
"I'm not going with you!"
Go-Between shouted, over in the crackling thunder.
"Just let me go!"
Shining's answer was to slowly shake his head from side to side.
"I can't. I promise. We can deal with things gently if you just give up." "Gently?"
The desperate Pegasus laughed.
"After what you just charged me with?"
Before Shining could stop him, the other pony ran to a nearby cloud machine and grabbed another puff of black thunder.
"Just walk out of here, Shining Armor. Leave. Wherever there, and leave me alone."
The captain took a single slow step towards his adversary. Go-Between pulled back a hoof, ready to kick the cloud and send a bolt of lightning flying in Shining's direction. "Please, Go-Between. I don't want any pony to get hurt."
"Then just leave."
Shining took another step, and to his relief, Between only answered by taking a step backward. They continued to dance for 2 more steps, matching each other pace for pace. The 4th step, though, ended differently. The air turned to ozone. A crack of white, like the edge of torn parchment, burned through Shining Armor's vision. He felt the raw heat on his chest. The sensation that followed was stunning in its own right. He expected to be thrown across the room in a burning agony. Instead, his armor glowed with a raw red light, His horn stirs with a calming warmth. Had the energy came from a unicorn spell, Shining would have been surprised. But that was the purpose of the gemstone coating his equipment after all. He had expected the attack to be warded off, but the absorption of its Pegasus magic gave him a new advantage. A new well of mana was his to draw upon. He put aside his new discovery to look at the other stallion coldly in his eyes. It's over now, go-between. Let go of the cloud and come quietly.
Yeah.
The Pegasus answers with a hollow voice.
Yeah.
Go quickly. Safe. Easy. He took a step forward. Then his deep brow furrowed even more heavily. The captain saw the feather of his left wing twitch. The first moment since his stunning spell took effect. No, I don't think so. The whole world seemed to slow for Shining Armor. He called out the magic that his armor had absorbed, forcing it together into a stronger stunning spell than the one that had tagged between his wing. At the same time, his host began running toward the grounded Pegasus. Between himself also broke into a run, going toward the hole in the rune's floor. Lightning tore through the air, and thunder cracked. Shining let his overpowered stunning spell fly as a ball of rose magic. It was aligned perfectly, straight for Go-Between's core. The Pegasus was ready. He flared his wings, killing his gathered momentum in an instant, and allowing the spell to fly freely past his head. Before Shining could gather any more mana, the other pony's wings were spread, and his body was over the hole. He let another bolt fly, but missed by a fair few feet, as the flying stallion's agility was too much for the unicorn's main aim. Shining came to the edge of the hole as Go-Between dove. Below, a field of storm clouds hovered in the air. A few hundred below the floor, Cloudsail's weather factory, and at least a mile above the grassy plains below. Go-Between dove until the top two layers of the scattered clouds separated him from Shining Armor. Once he felt safe with the barriers he had put between himself and the captain, he spread his wings into a glide, letting his lagging left wing rest. The nearest of the clouds was at least 30 feet away laterally, and another 10 feet down. Without hesitation, Shining took a galloping leap. For a split second, the unicorn knew what it was to fly. Wind brushed past his face, and the raw power of the sky shattered the air around him. Ahead, his target was getting away, still flying slowly from the sluggish entry of his left wing. The race was on. The unicorn landed on the black cloud, and felt the sheer power of the lightning dancing on his hooves. The sensation was tantalizing, but the captain didn't have time to enjoy it. Shining leapt from cloud to cloud above Go-Between's head. He knew that he wouldn't land a spell between the clouds, and he wasn't ready to risk sending his lead plummeting to his death on a bad wing. Instead, he spent the last of his magic from his armor teleporting from cloud to cloud, covering the distance. Then he ran, jumped, and waited for the opportunity. It came no more than 30 seconds after the captain caught up to his prey. Ahead, Go-Between's path went over the top of a particularly large storm cloud. It supported both ponies, enough to keep them from falling to their deaths. He ran forward and leapt down into the open air. Go-Between continued his steady glide, passing right into Shining's reach. The captain brought a hoof down onto the back of the other stallion's neck, ready to bring them both falling smoothly and steadily onto the cloud below. The plan worked perfectly, until Shining Armor's steel-lined shoe met the unguarded flesh of another pony. The accumulated electricity of a dozen bolts of lightning spread through the bodies of both ponies. In a searing burst of pain, Shining's worlds went white, then suddenly black. A trio of stallions in long black cloaks lined in fur walked in a heavy, stilted silence through the halls of Canterlot's palace. At the lead was Red Ink, who served as the source of the group's silence. The very first rule being on the commander's guard was not to speak out of turn, and the seriousness of this rule could only stand to be further stated when he was in a bad mood. Red Ink was in a terrible mood. His usually crisp stride was forced into a stomping march. His wings sat on his back in a twisted wedge. Were he wearing his wing blades, he would have been only a moment's motion away from decapitating any of the servants they passed in the hallways on their journey toward an unclear destination. Like most of the black cloaks, the earth pony named Malot was a young guards pony, in his late 20s. He was also in the strange position of being some pony whom Red Ink considered a personal friend. Perhaps it was for this reason that when the irate honor guard captain let out a pained growl, that Marlowe broke the first rule. What's wrong, Commandant? he asked, in rich Stalingradi. Ink glanced over his shoulder without stopping his stride.
I almost had that blood! And then she slips right between my hooves. Now I am to stay here, under the princess's witness for peace and happiness, when I should be using my real talents to solve this mess.
I thought you said your mentor led his god the way you do.
I did.
Ink took a moment of reorienting himself in the still unfamiliar halls of the palace, before continuing his discussion.
But the princess does trust in his judgment. She does not trust mine.
It is only a matter of time, though, Mullet offered, hoping to placate his commander. When Ink's unshod hoof struck next to the stone, the masonry cracked beneath his force.
A matter of time is what let Soldier On get away when I should have had her. The same is true of Masquerade. This is my chance to claim them both, and I want to risk that chance playing nice with all the other ponies.
The other pony in the trio was Sharp, an even younger Pegasus with wild hair and a scruffy chin that desperately wished he could grow into a real beard. His shaky but enthusiastic voice broke into the conversation. Why do you not let the Pegasus find her, then? Ink's gaze rotated slowly to his other companion. Most who knew his rep would have waited under the gaze, but Serp took it as a matter of pride.
You mean Thundercrack. Firstly, because he is one of us. I may have earned his loyalty, but my mentor taught him, and he is much valuable. He will come around when he learns the truth of their treason. Secondly, Serp, is because I cannot break him.
The young stallion looked with a face that suggested that red ink might have denied the existence of the moon. But you only said you could break any pony. Ink's frown grew even more pronounced.
Any pony can be broken, in time. The secret is knowing how to hurt them. Pain would not break the Sultan. I would need to know what he truly cares for. That is why we keep secrets. Even the princess must have something she could not stand to lose. I do not have time to dig up his secrets, so instead we are heading toward a different sort of prisoner.
Walnut raised a brow.
Commandant, if I may speak freely, we are headed the wrong way to get to the dungeons. We are not headed to the dungeons.
Ink's face betrayed disgust.
You would not keep a real prisoner in those cells. They are only good for robbers and fools. They are easy to break out of.
So, there is a better cage. Serp seemed intrigued by the suggestion.
How did your mentor tell you about this?
In a way. Ink pressed his hooves heavily against a pair of gold and purple doors.
He often told me that he would come here to think. Now be quiet. I would not have you interrupt me here.
The doors slammed open, and both Marla and Serp were surprised to find that their path had broken the trio outside, into the massive gardens that built onto the cliffs behind the palace. Though neither of his subordinates understood his paths, Ink's steps carried him, slowly but surely, toward a very peculiar statue in the far corner of the garden. He passed dozens of statues, wondering with every glance whether or not they shared the same peculiar secret as the one at his destination. It was the sort of puzzlement he would use as a threat in a heartbeat, but it seemed too cruel to be attacked of Celestia's kind heart. Perhaps it was possible he had underestimated her. He stepped to the foot of a towering, rather malformed statue of a hideous beast. Although he could not have actually read the common equestrian plaque below his misfed feet, he knew what it said. And it said, Roslot. Without another word, he lifted a hoof and pressed it against the cold stone of the statue. The chill of the stone sent shivers up Red Ink's leg. Before his eyes, the world was plunged into shadows. Darkness surrounded him, consuming his vision until even the statue and his own leg disappeared from his vision. His body shook with a cold, a sensation he had long since learned to ignore from the ice of dozens of his homeland winters. Wind blew against his exposed coat, burning as only the chill of the wind could. In it, he felt the cold wetness of snow, coming to rest upon his body and melting into little droplets of water. After the feelings came the sounds. Water was dripping somewhere nearby, eking out the last bits of motion before the chill locked it in place forever. The wind howled, and then went back into a gentle whispering on the patter that only its maker could comprehend. Above else, there was a song. Dozens of voices lifted up, calling out in the crisp tongue of Stalingrad and joining together. Ike should have known the words. He knew that he knew them. When he had come to face with Soldier On, it would have been the same tune that he hummed, slow and mournful, knowing that the notes would hurt her as no blade or hoof ever could. Yet in his mind it was as if the lyrics had been stolen away, and he could not remember why he even cared for the music. The smell of crisp cold air and the smog of factories came next, compared to the warm, gentle air of Canterlot. The pragmatic steads was a welcome taste of home. Stalingrad didn't pretend to be something it wasn't. It was a place for workers and common ponies to make their lives without worrying about what others thought of them. Some thought of it unwelcoming and cruel, but Red Ink loved it because it was genuine. The last thing to return was his sight, and it brought with it a countless list of questions. Red Ink stood on the rough concrete path that surrounded the meager garden of his father's home. It had been ages since the little square of dirt had grown any plants. Father often told him of how Mother loved to grow vegetables there, somehow keeping the frost away from all manner of gentle plants. Ink knew it only as the patch of dirt and rocks, but he had left it just the same as a place to have snowball fights with his brothers, or to run around in the summer, when the snow melted and the three colts could explore the world around them. Red Ink was not surprised to see his home, though his memories of Stalingrad covered the entire city. It was special, in a way that the rest of the city lacked for him. It alone was defined by his long-lost youthful innocence. What the captain was surprised to see was the other pony standing at the far end of the garden, staring out at the rising sun. Ink recognized him as he might of a photograph. The stallion was probably no more than 40. His blue-gray coat began to show the slightest favoritism for the gray, but his mane was still a sheer and healthy black. His flanks bore cutie marks of plain-grained seals, placed carefully between bolts of lightning that also looked as though they had been forged of metal. Though his muscles were lean, his wings were well trimmed. The way he sat gave him an air of tired age that passed the truth.
Mentor?
The other pony turned around, looking straight at Red Ink with tiny red eyes, looking as though they had just been painted on a yellow canvas.
Oh, you really believed me for a second, didn't you? Oh, that is just too rich, just priceless!
With a sudden anger overtaking Red Ink, without another thought, he took the wing, ready to strike the taunting creature. Discord, still wearing the form of the late commander, waved a hoof dismissively. A gust of wind threw Ink against the wall of his home, accompanying a loud crack.
What's wrong, Ink? Afraid your underlings will see some emotion out of that face of yours.
The Pegasus responded by rising to his hooves and charging on Fluff.
You're really going to try to fight me? Physically? Please, Red Ink. You might as well be trying to drown a fish.
Discord's limbs stretched and grew until he had assumed his original form.
Oh, but where are my manners? I'm Discord, spirit of chaos and disharmony. Red Ink, I have to say, I'm a big fan of your work. The way you dealt with all the dissenters after your revolution really warmed my heart.
Laughing, the spirit collapsed backward in midair.
Now, what brings you to my residence?
The soldier scraped a hoof on the ground.
I need to know where Masquerade and Soldier On are. Yes, I bet you do.
Discord looked around, as if checking to see if any pony were looking. Then he leaned down, still a dozen feet away from Red Ink. He held both his mismatched hands to his mouth. Then the words came out in a whisper.
Why should I tell you?
The pony pondered the words for a moment, putting together his best common equestrian.
Because I will otherwise be making life very unhappy, Discord.
Red Ink put on his most intimidating face, and received laughter returned.
Wow. At first, I thought you were just angry. I didn't realize you were actually this thick. Look, Captain.
He added a particular touch of sarcasm, along with a soppy salute to the word. Let me explain something. You can't hurt me. You can't touch me. And you certainly can't scare me. He snapped his fingers idly, and Red Ink jumped forward when a slimy something brushed against his back. I can scare you, though. After regaining his composure, the hard young pony turned a disappointed and furious face toward the spirit. So, I have wasted time? Oh no, not at all. I'm just... Discord looked away with a finger on his chin. When he looked back, he spoke with a decidedly different tone. I'm looking for trade, if you are wishing for answers. Ink's glare grew narrowed. Do not mock me. Why not? I mock every pony else. Anyway, I imagine you're probably wanting to do things the way he did. Discord's lion paw momentarily gestured up to the garden, where a wispy figure of the commander appeared for a mere moment. It's pretty simple. I like to hear a good story. He used to tell me all about the ponies he met and the things he did. That's how I know about you, after all. The Draconicus grinned. So, you tell me personal and maybe a bit chaotic, and I'll consider telling you what you want to know. As Ink pondered the demand, Discord snapped his fingers. Before the floating spirit, a table appeared, holding a few bottles of fine Battalion wine, a bowl of little white beans spread into green pods, and what appeared to be grilled duck liver. The Draconicus' tongue flickered in and out for a moment, before he glanced over to his guests. Care for something to drink?
Don't touch me.
Red Ink shook his head.
What do you gain from storing?
Well, entertainment. It's boring being a law and order for a few millennia, even if I still get to peek in on all the fun chaos that goes in the world. But I also do have my uses for information. You can cause quite a bit of chaos with just the right few words.
And you are telling me where to find them?
Think of it this way, Ink. If I didn't tell you, you would come back and tell me another story later. Discord offered his most genuine smile, and spread his hands and appeared to welcome me. So, if you're up for it, tell me about your brother.
Foresight.
Ink shrugged, rolling the fur collar of his singular coat.
He is bureaucrat, politician, loves his...
No. Discord shook his head. I don't care about him. Your boring brother isn't the reason you're trying to kill Soldier On or Masquerade, is he? There's no fun to be had in listening to his story. No, I want to know about the third brother. What was his name? The spirit grasped his head, feigning ignorance. Red Ink took a deep breath and settled to himself. Although the idea of the discussing was discomforting, it would not do to dishonor his brother's memory to describe him.
Midnight was a Pegasus, younger brother. When we were young, we flew together.
The broken language trailed off as Ink looked up. Overhead, his memories were dancing for both himself and the Draconicus to see. Figments of a pair of Pegasus colts spun around each other in the air, struggling in a friendly fight. They froze, just as Red Ink took the advantage and flew overhead. Discord looked at the grown stallion expectantly. You have to keep talking. That's how a story works, after all.
Ink nodded coldly. He got his cutie mark first, when he was very young. 5, I can't remember.
The transparent little colt looked at his flank in awe. A burst of white light and magic revealed the mark of a shield, and present with a crescent moon in a field of stars.
He saved me when I got lost flying in the dark. Always good at finding ponies, tracking them. Perceptive. Came in handy during Revolution. We were God's ponies together, and Baron's army first. We were
He hesitated on the word, unsure whether it belonged on his tongue. After a few moments of silence, he chose another word.
Brothers.
Two older colts wrestled together on the ground, considerably more aggressively. Red Ink was the larger, bearing on his flank the mark of a quill, tipped with the point of a sword. A line of bright red was drawn behind it, although whether it was blood or merely ink, none could say.
When we grew older, Father taught us politique. He saw how a fair baron was. His voice showed many others.
The memory sifted to a massive crowd of ponies gathered in the garden, standing with his back to his home on top of a little more than a wooden crate, Watchful eyes shouted silently at the gathering. At his host, his sons listened intensely to the words. We started the revolution. Ink had been expecting to see more of his memories pan out before him in sepia silence. He would have known the first battle and the fires of snow. Instead, the scene froze, and the voice that spoke up was not his own or Discord's. Red Ink, what do you think you're doing? He turned in recognition of the voice, and immediately dropped into a bow. Princess. There is a reason I did not suggest going to him first in search of information, Captain. The princess's tone was not so much angry as disappointed. Come with me. Her horn ignited in a potent golden glow, was tore open the hair at the far side of the garden, leading out into the warm late summer afternoon of Canterlot. Well, it was nice to see you too, Celestia. Are you sure you want to be going so soon? I was just getting to know your new best friend. The Dracarys' eyebrows rose and fell over in rapid suggestion. Neither Red Ink nor I have time to waste on your lies, Discord. That is really a shame. The spirit smiled. There are so many things I could tell you. For example, at this very moment, your precious bearer of loyalty is considering throwing away the gift you so kindly gave her by fighting a dragon in Zabaica. Celestia's gilded hooves stopped halfway at her own portal. How do you... You spent quite a deal of magic on that, didn't you? Discord's leonine paw gestured to the dull pink mane Celestia was wearing. I have to say, I do love your new look, though I still think you should have left it the way I styled it a few years back. As if to make a point, Discord conjured a perfect statue of Celestia's form, rearing back in fear and surprise. His knuckles rapped idly against the flowing mane. It was quite slimming. The princess planted her hooves firmly in the snow, showing the spirit a defiant gaze. Answer me, Discord! How do you know about Rainbow Dash? Oh, Celestia, isn't it more fun not knowing how it all works? That's what I've always thought, anyway. The mirth dropped from his voice for a moment. You should probably be grateful, too. If I had just bothered to look at the future and actually plan my return, I could have burnt your stupid letters. Then I'd be ruling the world right now. After the dull diatribe, he snapped his fingers, conjuring a storm of tritone lightning. Ink didn't recognize the colors, but they were all too familiar to the princess. To answer your ever so polite question, princess, I gave your precious subject a choice between going to her death and betraying a friend. I was hoping she would run off and save Luna at the cost of his life. But I confess I didn't get to see the end. Your precious captain interrupted me. So now, again, I'm trying to give him some advice that will save precious widow Luna. Celestia shook her head and turned away from the mischievous spirit. He's playing with you, Captain Ink. We should be going. The Pegasus followed the towering alicorn toward her magically formed exit, only to stop at the barricade when the desperate being shouted one last warning. Soldier On is on her way to Baltimore, looking for some pony called Hard Boney. Boiled. If you hurry, you can catch her. Ink nodded, unable to resist a parting word. Perhaps we speak again. We better, Discord shouted, as the exit to his own pathetic realm faded from sight. You still owe me a story. Rainbow's Passage rose from carefully crafted stones onto unshaped raw rocks. With each step, the familiar weight on her foreleg reminded her of the weapon she was carrying. Ahead, some strange monsters separated the Pegasus from the princess for the cure. His Discord was to believe. Fortunately, the journey was short. It ended with a small step into the cavern. An overhead lamp gave light to what seemed to be a storeroom. Shelves covered every surface of natural walls, holding up countless mysterious items, only half of which were labeled in a language the mare couldn't understand. They held her attention only momentarily, however, as a clearly audible voice could be heard through the door at the far side of the room.
That smells magnificent, Mizugu.
The tone of the speaker was rough and coarse, far too deep to belong to any pony or zebra Rainbow could imagine. Her ears perked, recognizing the name of the zebra mare she was searching for. moving as quickly as she could with the spear on her leg. She edged up to the door and placed her ear smoothly against it. The voice continued.
Give it 3 turns, counterclockwise.
After a moment of silence, it still seems too acidic, Smog. Rainbow was confused. She was speaking to the worm monster? And what did they mean by acid? With stealth carefully learned from years of pranking with Pinky, Rainbow cracked the door and peeked through. The cavern contained 2 relatively small figures, though the statement was only true for one because of the enormity of the cavern. The first was a zebra mare, probably 5 or 6 years Dash's younger. Gold bands clinked loosely on her neck and legs with each movement as she stirred a smoking golden cauldron with a long silver ladle. Across from her, sitting atop a huge pile of gold, was a titanic dragon. Blue scales ranging from black to the bright tone of Rainbow's own coat adorned his hulky form, most of which filled the cavern. Little bursts of smoke slid out of his nostrils with each of his slow breaths, but by judging by the focus in his reptilian eyes, he was clearly awake. The dragon took in a deep breath and then locked up. Slowly, his eyes shifted to look in Rainbow's direction. The Pegasus froze in place.
My, a visitor. Come a little closer, little pony. I won't hurt you.
Rainbow's wings flared up as he tried to look as tough as possible. Having been confronted, there was only one thing to do. I'm here to rescue Mizungu. Let us leave, and I won't have to hurt you. The dragon looked at the young zebra, and the pair shared a laugh strong enough to shake the cavern. Rocks tumbled from the ceiling.
You are misunderstanding the situation, pony. I am cold, and this is Mizungu, as you already know. What is your name?
Dash cocked her head sideways. She had been expecting a worm monster, not a dragon, and one that was willing to talk, instead of simply frying her with his breath was more surprising still. I'm Rainbow Dash. Is it your name, Smog? The dragon nodded.
Smog, yes.
The change in intonation was subtle, but nevertheless evident.
I know it sounds like one of your words, but I am not named for haze, or mist, or smoke. Still, you are welcome to call me Smog if you wish. Names mean little in any case.
Mizungu walked closer, abandoning the golden pods he had been trending to. You're really a Pegasus. Are you from Cloudsdale, or Canterlot? What is it like? Oh, how is my Equestrian? Do I sound terribly backwards?
Please, Mizungu, do not drown her with your curiosity. There will be much time for you to talk, but I imagine that her journey has left our guest hungry. Do you care for wrestling?
Rainbow looked between the faces of the dragon and zebra. They certainly seemed friendly enough. With a slow, hopping gait defined by the spear on her leg, she made her way over to the two. I don't know. What's wrestling?
The only pony dish I know how to cook, Smog answered. Cucumber and barley soup, which I am told is quite hearty. It contains no meat.
One of the dragon's dexterous foreclaws grabbed a rough clay barrel from near the door, nearly as big as Rainbow herself, and pulled out a few dozen red vegetables. Without any particular prompt, he tossed them into the golden pot.
It should be ready soon. Now tell us, Rainbow Dash, why have you come all this way to save Mizungu?
The Pegasus nodded. It's kind of a long story, really. I'm here in Zabrika to save Princess Luna. The story continued for a few long minutes, even as Mizungu gathered the bowls from the storeroom that marked Rainbow's passage, and returned to serve their dinner. Oh, it took a few longer than a few minutes if my live reads have been any indication. Dash's description of her bow with masquerade earned a look of incredulity from Smog, while Mizungu seemed entranced by every word of the description the Pegasus offered her distant homeland. Often she tried to interrupt with a question, but at each heading Smog held up a claw to silence her. Rainbow explained her journey to Zabrika, and finally concluded with her encounter in the Marzipan herd. When the story was over, Smog let out a hearty chuckle.
You've had a terrible misunderstanding indeed, Rainbow Dash. I am the worm monster that you have been sent to slay.
But you're not a worm.
The word is worm. A subtle distinction, I will admit, but in my tongue, such distinctions are common. It is a term for my species for a dragon that has grown to their full size naturally, rather than through an overgrown horde or a greedy desire for everything they see. Few of our numbers survive to such a great age, but that is not the great misunderstanding. You see, I did not kidnap Mizungu.
Rainbow looked her way. The zebra nodded. I heard about the dragon on Mount Kilimanjaro, and I came to learn from him. Learn from him? Das again found herself confused. Like what? Cooking?
As you are no doubt aware, the Merseybeanians are quite xenophobic.
When Das's confusion at the word was made clear, the dragon continued.
They distrust outsiders. Mizungu wanted to see the world, learn its ways.
I heard all sorts of stories about pony medicine when I was younger. I wanted to learn how to use it to help my tribe, but Kionzi won't let me go. Das nodded in understanding. So you ran away and came here? Yes, that was almost 2 years ago. In that time, I have learned much, but soon I will need to go out and see the world for myself. Oh, I am so excited to go! The pony positively bristled with happiness at the thought. Can you take me with you when you leave? I don't know. I guess? Rainbow shrugged. I'm not really thinking about leaving anytime soon. Like I said, I need to take you back to the herd so I can save Princess Luna. Smog looked to the far cavern wall, where a sizable hole gave acres to the open air.
You're already on the mountain, free of their control. Why not simply go on your own?
I can't. Dead Reckoning is still with them. I'm not sure what they'll do if I abandon him.
Smog nodded. This is troubling indeed. However, I fear that if Mizungu returns, they will hold her there, unable to leave. I am hesitant to send her back.
Oh, come on! Rainbow cried out in agitation. Do you not understand? Princess Luna will die if I don't go!
And you think it will be any better for Mizungu if she were forced back to her herd?
Rainbow nodded firmly. Of course! She wouldn't be dead! I'd be stuck there! Mizungu shook her head. I don't see why you just so fly down there and talk to Fauna yourself. I'm not leaving Dead Reckoning behind.
What does this other pony mean to you? By your account, you have only known 3 days at most.
The Pegasus looked at the dragon like the monster had been made out to be. Why should it matter how well I know him? I'm not going to risk him getting hurt or killed when she can just come back with me. Mizugu had a nearly incensed response, but Smog silenced her with a raised claw. Only when the young zebra had calmed did his slit eyes settle firmly on Rainbow. His attention felt heavy and tiring.
Let us not let emotions define our actions, Rainbow Dash. Think calmly for a moment and listen to me. In your culture, there exists a concept known as the duel to the mark. Have you heard of the term?
Rainbow shook her head to indicate her ignorance.
This is no surprise. Such activity was more prevalent in the past. Once there was a time when your kin would resolve their disagreements with violence. Proud ponies would battle one another to determine who was in the right. The cruelest of this instance was the duel to the mark. 2 ponies would fight, and the winner would strip from his victim the purpose of their existence.
A claw gestured towards Rainbow's cutie mark.
Often, amongst unicorns, it would end with a shattered horn or stolen lance, anything that could be done to humiliate and destroy the loser. To lose was considered a fate worse than death.
What does that have to do with this? Rainbow asked. I don't want to hurt her. I just need her to head back so Reckoning and I can leave.
And do you truly believe that when in turn she tries to leave, she will be permitted to?
The worm shook his head, stating bluntly of his own interpretation.
You would deny her everything she believes in, and it would be unfair to me to let me force that on her. It would be as cruel as stripping her of her own mark.
Something inside the Pegasus snapped at the words, and she in turn snapped at Smog with her own. Life isn't fair! I never wanted to be a guard pony, but here I am. If she has to go home to make sure that no pony there gets hurt, then that's too bad for her! Rainbow stood up and took a firm step towards Mizungo. An enormous blue fist smashed down between the 2 equines, sending fissures through the stone on the cavern floor.
This is not your choice to make, pony.
Mizuku spoke up. If he really needs me,
Do not be convinced to give up your dreams over this. It is your life, and I won't see your free will taken from you.
with a rumble and low growl, the titanic creature rose up to his full height, the top of his head scraping the cavern ceiling.
You are no longer welcome here, Rainbow Dash. Choose now if you will wish your princess or risk your partner, but you will not steal my student from me.
Rainbow's mind was boiling pot of 1,000 emotions and ideals. Pride, rage, and loyalty stood foremost amongst them, drowning out the tiny fear of reason and depression. The mare stood tall and defiant, looking up at the enormous creature, whose jaws could devour her in a single easy bite. Her face turned to steel, and a subtle energy built behind her eyes. I've had enough of everybody trying to get in my way, Smog. Try and stop me. Without waiting for a response, she took off at a stilted gallop toward the zebra mare.
I do not enjoy this,
was Smog's entire reply, as a freakishly sharpened foreclaw swung down toward the running mare. Rainbow had been expecting the attack. She looked to the side, using her wings for the extra bit of distance that she needed to clear the length of his hand. She might have screamed in joy, under bare circumstances. The air beneath her feathers bent to her will, launching her forward nearing the full length of the cave. Though faint, a trail of rainbow marked her passing. Her magic felt tired and worn, as though she had spent the last full day in the air instead of on the ground. Nevertheless, it was there. Smog glared at the sun in motion, then brought his own emotions' enormous wings to bear. A surge of wind to rival any hurricane filled the cave, sending Rainbow spinning into his wall. She recovered just in time to see his claw moving toward her, and with desperation she leapt between his fingers. A puff of her wings put her in the air, but it wasn't truly flying. Instead, she felt more like she had taken a huge jump, followed by a glide. Still, the speed was enough to swoop down towards Mizuku. Get off me! The zebra shouted. Sorry, I have to do this. Daz wrapped her legs around the zebra's core and pulled up. Her grip was strong, but her wings and magic still weren't ready for such a load. With a sudden change of trajectory, the two fell to the ground, where they rolled into a heap. This time, Rainbow wasn't fast enough to avoid Smog's grasp. The needle points of his massive clawed fingers held her gently, but firmly, as he was lifted to his head to meet his gaze. Along the way, she bit and beat and bucked and even stabbed at his claws, trying to loosen his grip. The thick scales covering his body resisted every attack. Finally, she came face to face with the dragon, looking level into his face. His brow narrowed coldly.
I'm sorry, Rainbow Dash. You must leave her alone.
I can't!
Then this is the end of your journey.
What followed was a slow draw of breath, and then the dragon's mouth opened wide. Rainbow's conscious mind was filled only with the horror of the heat to come. She needed to do something, or without a doubt she would die. She lunged forward as free as her upper limbs would allow, seeking to harm without thinking. The spear on her leg moved forward with her, unguided by will beyond the instinct to survive at all costs. Flying free of its ancient straps, torn from a temple wall only hours earlier, it soared through the air, whether by chance or fate. Its path led directly for the worm's right eye. What followed was a strange and terrible silence. No great gout of blood or gore flew from the wound. The shaft simply sank into that reptilian eye, leaving only a tiny drop of red to mark its passing. The golden orb swallowed the entire weapon, hiding it from view somewhere deep within the recesses of Smog's skull. Suddenly, sharply, and firmly, the dragon's breathing stopped. Rainbow felt his grip loosen, but at the same time, his body froze up. She struggled free as he began to tip forward, and found herself gliding down slowly as it fell crash against the collapse of his body onto his golden horn. A hail of coins and a wave of precious metal slid suddenly across the cavern floor. And when it ceased, all was silence. It echoed how Rainbow felt, empty, cold, and hollow. What was he supposed to do next? You killed him. The trailing pain in Mizungu's whisper was behind a stalwart face. There was anger in it, along with the crippling sorrow, but both were subdued and mild. She didn't want to sneer or cry or shout. She looked Rainbow straight in the eyes and shook her head slowly. Disappointment flowed freely from the look. I didn't want to. I didn't want to. The zebra looked at the corpse of her mentor, stating her response coldly. That won't bring him back. I'm sorry. Not with that. She turned to the cavern's external opening and took a hesitant step forward. You won. The strong will triumph. We should go. Part of Rainbow wanted to protest. She had been protecting herself. She had been protecting Dead Reckoning. If Mizungu just came with her, it wouldn't have happened. If Spock had given in, he would still be alive. She didn't want to kill him. She didn't enjoy it. She wished there had been some other way. She knew better than to say any of those things. There were words meant for her own benefit, not the zebra's. The sorrow, or grief, or whatever else was to come of her actions, would be paid for another day. Rainbow's way was to get things done, to help others. So steeling herself and putting aside her emotions as best as she could, the mare strode forth into the light of day. Outside, Mizungu's hoof was tracing something in the dirt. Rainbow knew the characters of zebra language, though she had no hope in reading them. She watched and traced slowly and softly, knowing it would only last through the first rain or snow and wind to calm the mountain. She didn't ask what they said. She didn't have to. Do you wish to know? Mizungu spoke again coldly, trying to hide her emotions as Rainbow had, but failing. The old story here, the mountaintop sage. They saw only a monster, plague of a cruel heart. Few understood the wisdom he wished to impart. His words and experiences, the gifts of his age, were stolen away when we were torn apart. Now he remains, a corpse in the Stone Age. Farewell amongst the smog of death. You could have been so much more.